So I've come across this common issue on older Hondas. Today we're going to talk about valve cover fasteners. On 90s Hondas, some non-VTEC engines had nuts with studs for their valve cover. Most of them, especially the VTEC models, came with bolts that hold down the valve cover. This is what they look like on all 96 to 2000 Honda Civics, and they've got bolts going across. You'll notice I've replaced this one with a nut and stud. Let's go look at the Accord one. The non-VTEC Accord head had studs with nuts. This one, which is the VTEC head, has all bolts. I've run into issues where all of the bolts will actually torque down like they're not stripped, but for some reason one part of the gasket will leak, usually on a corner. On this one, which was this corner, had a bolt that torqued all the way down, everything was fine, set it to spec, it would leak right here. First I thought the bolt must be defective, so I took the bolt out and replaced it with another one. Same issue occurred. Checked the thread, didn't seem stripped. Retapped the thread, put the bolt back in, still didn't fix the issue. So instead I took a M6x1 stud, put it in there, locked it down with a lock nut, and then put a nut on it and tightened it down lightly. Just snug, and it fixed the problem. This car's been driving with one stud and nut out of all the bolts for a few months now and no problems. So imagine my surprise when I think I'm going crazy because I've changed the valve cover gasket on this valve cover on this new head I put on my car multiple times, thinking, oh, it's the quality of the gasket, 'tis why that back corner doesn't seal right. It likes to leak back here even when I put the appropriate RTV in the little corners behind the cam. It's still seeping oil on this back corner right where the bolt is, and it's not run off from the breather up here. So what am I going to do about this? I'm going to do the same thing I did to the Civic on that back corner. Eventually I will completely stud and nut all the valve covers that I have because this is an ongoing issue. I don't know why they went to bolts in the 90s, because ever since the 60s when the Honda Civic CVCC came out, it was using studs with nuts on them. Even the non-VTEC version of this car used stud with nuts on them. So I have no idea why they converted over to bolts, but I know that Honda could tell that was a mistake. The B series had studs with nuts on them, and when the K series came out, surprise, they went back to studs with nuts on them. It apparently got noticed somewhere that there was an issue, and that's why they went back to studs with nuts on them, I would assume. Alright, so I'm going to start breaking this down. Now we can see exactly where it was leaking oil. It's from right here at this corner all the way over to here. That's what we're going to fix by doing this. As you can see, the brand new gasket, there's nothing wrong with it. No reason why it should be leaking. I had even put silicone in those corners they tell you to do in the factory manual. So how do you make a stud for one of these? This has saved me so many times on so many different repairs. This is a M6x1 all thread rod. Get these off of eBay, you can get them for under 10 bucks for a pair. Even comes with a couple nuts with them. Count how many of these you're gonna do, and you'll want to get like a 6mm Honda nut from the junkyard or whatever you've got. You're gonna want one of these for the top, and you're going to want one for the bottom per each stud. So how we determine how big these need to be, we're going to thread the stud into the hole, and then we're going to put a lock nut on the bottom of it, and then we're going to put the valve cover back on and mark it with a Sharpie past where the grommet is. If you want to be able to thread decorations onto the end, you can do that. You just need to cut it extra long. So I'm just going to thread that into the hole. like so. So I've got the stud into the engine head. I'm going to take a lock nut, put it all the way down. Okay, we've got our lock nut all the way down. I'm going to tighten it a little bit there. Now we got a solid stud. So now we're going to come over the top of it, and we're going to come straight down, and we're going to put our valve cover on like we usually would. So, I'm just going to take a normal Civic style grommet, one of these, like this. If you had to, you could yank these off of one of the old bolts if it's easy to get off of there. Drop that on here, pop it down where it would like seal. Now I'm just going to take another nut, throw it on. Okay, so with it like this, we can come back and we can put a Sharpie mark little ways up from that nut and then cut it off flush. You could also, if you want to put decorations on it, like let's say you want to take something and drill a hole in it and thread it to fit on here like spikes, you could cut it a little bit taller, keeping in mind how many threads you need. Now you can mark this and cut it with a handsaw off the car, or if you're gutsy, you can take a cutoff wheel and cut this off while it's on the car, and then that way it's 100% the way that you see it. I'm a little gutsy, so that's what I'll probably do, but everybody has their different ways of doing things. Now in an awkward area like this, that cut did not come out very well, so I'll probably have to file and deburr it. But you can run the nut off of the end going up, and it'll rethread it. With the way this probably looks, I'll file it flat, and then recut the threads, and it'll be good to go. So I deburred the end a bit. I could make it totally square, but I'm not that concerned about it. We got to put thread lock on this end, put it in, lock the nut down, and they'll be good to go. Don't use permanent thread lock, just use medium blue. The medium blue does not hold up to a lot of temperature, but it will lock the threads in. The main way it's locked in is by this nut, but the thread locker is kind of your Hail Mary just in case. I've got this just Harbor Freight number 42 thread lock. So put a little bit on the end here, wiped a bit off. That way it's just enough, you don't want it to run everywhere. Put it on in here. Lock nut down. You want it just to where it stops solid. You don't want to crank down too hard. I apologize for the wind, it's a little windy today. This is what our stud looks like with it locked down with a nut. I just use a normal factory Honda nut, stuff that comes with the car. It's got a flat bottom, so it really locks to the flat surface. And now that that's on there, I'm going to wipe dry the gasket area, and then I'm going to put the valve cover back on and put a nut on it and call it a day. Eventually I want all of the bolts on this car to be studs for the valve cover. I just do this for now because I think it's going to rain soon. So now that both gasket surfaces are wiped down, I'm going to go ahead and put it back together. Now that that's back on, we can start tightening the fasteners back on, working from the inside out. Short ones are up front, long ones are in the back. We can just tighten them down from the inside out with a small ratchet. Right when they stop, you just quit. Right. Push the center. Be the one that's not a stud first. Stops. Now this you got to be really careful on, because the cars that have studs with nuts, they talk about only tighten them down to 7 foot-pounds. Now, my smaller torque wrench that I had that measured in inch-pounds and could be very, very accurate on low foot-pounds is broke. And the only one that I have that could measure it's a very, very large one. So I got to be very careful. Instead of looking at the torque spec rating, I just tighten it down just to where it looks like it's fitting the gasket. So not too much. During this, I usually go for ratcheting wrench for this. And I watch the surface of the head and the valve cover. I just tighten it down until it looks snug. And you just compare it to the thickness of how thick the gasket is throughout the side of the valve cover compared to the other ones. Okay, and I think that's going to have me. What I'll do is I'll spray this down with brake cleaner, get any residual oil that's on there off, and then take it for a test drive. And if that doesn't leak, then it's a success. If it does still leak, this could be warped, or this isn't tight enough. That's a real simple way to convert your valve cover bolts over to valve cover studs with nut. Hopefully this helps somebody. If you're still watching and you'd like to help contribute to the channel, we do have a Kofi and we have a Throne Gifts. This will help us get the tools that we need to produce more content, tools that we need to work on more things. I also put up polls in the community tab, so anything that we go to do with the channel or any direction we go to take, I put polls up for what y'all want us to do next. One thing I'd really like to do is to get a Ryobi work light. It's under $100. It would be easy to obtain, and if I could get a hold of one, then this summer, come July, this summer when it's super, super hot here, at night it's bearable, and we'd be able to use that to make content because it'd be bright enough to light up the whole yard where we'd be able to work. It'd be bright enough to be able to use a camera and to create more content. We posted it up on our Throne Gifts wish list. I'd very much appreciate it if we got a hold of one of those. We'd be putting out way more videos during the summer, because if you noticed last year when the summer hit, the amount of videos I was putting out dipped.